April 1943. North Africa. The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of sand under a blistering sun, but beneath its golden waves lay a deadly game of survival. The 48th Royal Tank Regiment moved cautiously across the dunes. The engines of the Shermans roared like metallic beasts, each note a warning to the crews that one misstep could cost them their lives. Major Douglas Lidderdale sat in his command tank, scanning the horizon. Recon reports had come in. A new German tank had been spotted nearby. Rumors of it had circulated for months. A massive, almost invincible machine with a gun capable of punching through any Allied armor. The soldiers whispered its name like a legend, the Tiger. "God, it's huge," muttered Sergeant Thomas, sliding closer to the radio. "And they say one of those can take out a whole column." "We can't ignore it, Thomas," Lidderdale replied calmly, his hand gripping the controls. "But our goal isn't to destroy it. We have to capture it. Learn from it. If we can." A shiver ran through the crew, a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Capturing a Tiger? Madness. But everyone knew the potential reward, a trophy that could change the course of the war. At dawn, a dark silhouette appeared on the horizon, massive and formidable, its long barrel gleaming in the sunlight. The crews froze. "That's it," Thomas whispered. "Tiger 131. "Yes," Lidderdale said. "Crew, pay attention. This will be risky. No mistakes." The British tanks moved forward cautiously, like stalking cats. The Tiger seemed unstoppable, but intelligence had revealed its weaknesses: a slow turning radius, vulnerability at the rear, and a limited fuel capacity, only 120 miles on a full tank. The crew realized that their chance was slim, but it existed. Major Lidderdale gathered his crews around a map. "Listen carefully," he said. "We can't let it escape. Our objective is to capture it intact. One wrong move, and we die." The plan was simple but deadly. They would lure the Tiger into a narrow valley where its maneuverability would be limited, disable the crew by blocking the hatches, and tow it away using repair tools and ingenuity. "Who's going first?" Lidderdale asked, looking at the tank commanders. "We are, sir," the sergeants replied in unison, gripping their controls tightly. Every soldier understood that today they would witness legend, or become just another statistic in the daily toll of war. As the sun rose higher, the British tanks glided over the sand, silent but determined. The Tiger noticed them, but its massive weight and the limited visibility slowed its reaction. "Now!" Lidderdale shouted. A Sherman's cannon roared, drawing the Tiger crew's attention. At that moment, the British tanks flanked it, using the dunes as cover. A well-placed shot damaged the tracks, and the Tiger ground to a halt. Soldiers rushed to block the hatches. The German crew struggled, but the narrow valley made any escape impossible. Within minutes, Tiger 131 was captured. The crew stood beside the colossal machine, awestruck. It seemed almost alive, its armor shining, its gun longer than some tanks, the interior a maze of levers, instruments, and controls. "I can't believe it," Thomas muttered. "This beast, and it only goes 120 miles on a tank of fuel." Lidderdale nodded. "It's German engineering. But now it's ours." Tiger 131 was taken to a secure location for examination. Engineers and tank crews studied every inch: the armor, the engine, the gun, and the targeting system. Each detail sparked awe. "It's massive, and it guzzles fuel like there's no tomorrow," whispered one engineer. "But the gun, it can pierce anything," added a sergeant. The Lidderdale crew realized that their mission had been about more than combat. It was about knowledge. Each day, they recorded observations, tested systems, and built models to understand how the tank would behave in battle. The trophy soon became more than a technical curiosity. It was a morale booster for the Allies. Capturing the Tiger showed that even the most fearsome machines could be taken. Knowledge of its weaknesses, fuel range, and performance helped improve battlefield tactics. "We've studied the beast. Now we know how to defeat it," Lidderdale told his crew. As the sun set over the desert, Tiger 131 stood like a monument. It had survived the war and become a symbol of courage, strategy, and audacious risk. The Lidderdale crew knew they had done more than capture a tank. They had made history, their names entwined with the legend of Tiger 131, a story of war, bravery, and human ingenuity. The following morning, the desert air was thick with heat and tension. Tiger 131 lay immobilized, yet its presence dominated the landscape, casting a long shadow over the sand like a silent sentinel. The British crews circled it carefully, almost reverently, each soldier aware that they were standing next to a machine that had terrified entire divisions. Its sheer size was staggering, towering over the Shermans, with armor plates thick enough to shrug off most Allied shells. Lidderdale inspected the tank from the side, his eyes scanning every seam and rivet. "This is what they trusted their lives to," he muttered. "Everything we've faced until now was practice for this moment." The German crew, captured but alive, sat nearby under the scorching sun. They were exhausted, bruised, and stunned, but their pride still glimmered in their eyes. They had been trained to fight, and yet here they were, outmaneuvered by cunning and courage rather than brute force. Lidderdale approached them slowly. "Your tank," he said gently, "is a marvel. But today, it belongs to us." A young German gunner muttered something under his breath. Lidderdale didn't understand the words, but he felt the sentiment: frustration, disbelief, and perhaps a flicker of grudging respect. The war had thrown them together briefly, and in that moment, all the terror and glory of armored combat crystallized into a shared human experience. Engineers began their careful inspection. The sound of tools against metal echoed across the valley. Every lever, every gear, every panel was scrutinized. Lidderdale's crew leaned over the open hatch, peering inside at the complex web of mechanical parts. The interior was surprisingly cramped, with switches and gauges crowded around the commander's seat. It seemed impossible that a machine of such size could operate with such precision. "Look at the gun," Thomas said, running a gloved hand along the barrel. "It's massive, but the recoil, they've built it like a beast that can barely be tamed." The engineers nodded, scribbling notes. They measured the armor thickness, tested the firing mechanism, and even examined the radio system. Every detail mattered. Understanding Tiger 131 could give them a critical edge in battles to come. Days passed as the crew worked tirelessly. They studied the limited fuel capacity, discovering that despite its monstrous power, the tank could only travel 120 miles on a full tank. It was a revelation. All the fearsome stories about Tiger tanks seemed slightly less imposing when the practical limitations became clear. Yet the psychological impact remained. News of the capture spread quickly among Allied forces. Morale soared. Soldiers who had feared encountering Tigers now whispered in awe, knowing that even the mightiest weapon could be conquered with courage, intelligence, and teamwork. One evening, Lidderdale walked alone to the side of the Tiger. The sun was sinking low, casting long orange shadows. The tank was silent, still, yet it seemed alive with memory. He imagined the battles it had fought, the towns it had rolled through, the explosions it had survived, the lives it had endangered. And now, here it was, a trophy and a teacher, revealing its secrets slowly to those who had earned the right to study it. "History will remember you," he said quietly. "Not as a weapon, but as a lesson." Inside the crew quarters, soldiers talked late into the night, recounting the capture. Each retelling added small details: the hesitation of the German crew, the precise timing of the flanking maneuver, the roar of the Sherman's guns. The operation became legend, a story passed from one soldier to another, growing in drama and significance with each retelling. Thomas lay awake, thinking about the battle. He replayed it in his mind over and over, focusing not on the terror, but on the teamwork, the strategy, the moments when courage triumphed over fear. The Tiger had been a machine, yes, but it had also been a mirror, reflecting the bravery and skill of everyone who faced it that day. By the time Tiger 131 was shipped to Britain for detailed analysis, the crew had formed a bond with it. It was no longer just a tank. It was a symbol of their ingenuity, their determination, and the audacity to challenge what seemed invincible. Engineers replicated parts of its design in training tanks, strategists developed new tactics, and instructors used it to teach soldiers how to confront the enemy with confidence. Lidderdale's final report was concise but revealing. The Tiger was formidable, but not invincible. Its fuel limitations and mechanical vulnerabilities were as significant as its fearsome firepower. Knowledge, courage, and quick thinking had turned a legend into a lesson. Even decades later, Veterans spoke of that desert in Tunisia, of the day when fear became fascination, and terror became triumph. Tiger 131 survived the war not just as a tank, but as a story of human daring, a reminder that even the mightiest machine could be understood, conquered, and transformed into a beacon of knowledge. And though the desert sands have long since shifted and the battles are memories, the shadow of Tiger 131 endures, a testament to strategy, bravery, and the extraordinary audacity of those who dared to capture a legend. The days following the capture were a mix of triumph and tension. Tiger 131 sat immobilized in the makeshift Allied base, yet it radiated power even in silence. Crews rotated shifts, some documenting technical details, others guarding the prize. For the British soldiers, every moment with the tank was a lesson in respect. It wasn't just a machine, they could feel its weight, its history, the deadly efficiency built into every inch of metal. Lidderdale often wandered around the Tiger alone, his boots crunching on sand and gravel. He imagined the battles it had seen, the villages reduced to rubble, the puffs of smoke on distant hills, the lives altered or lost by the decisions of its crew. And yet now, the Tiger was inert, vulnerable, revealing its secrets willingly to those who had earned them. Thomas, restless and alert as always, was fascinated by the controls inside the tank. He climbed in, brushing off sand, and ran his hands over the levers and gauges. The ergonomics were unusual, cramped, but precise. He could almost hear the echoes of the German crew shouting commands as they maneuvered across the North African desert, the roar of the engine beneath them, the terrifying potential of each round fired. "You know," he said, his voice quiet, "it's amazing how a tank this big can feel so alive. Like it has a mind of its own." Lidderdale nodded, leaning over the turret. "That's why we respect it. Not fear alone, but respect. And now we learn from it. Every move, every system, every weakness." Engineers meticulously recorded the thickness of the armor, the angles of the sloped plates, the firing range of the main gun. They disassembled the engine, noting the craftsmanship and mechanical ingenuity. Despite the tank's massive size, they found limitations. The tracks required constant maintenance, the engine consumed fuel at a startling rate, and the Tiger's turning radius made it vulnerable in tight spaces. These discoveries were priceless. Meanwhile, morale among the other Allied soldiers soared. Word of the capture spread quickly, carried from camp to camp. The tale of Tiger 131 became a legend, a story not only of bravery but of clever strategy and teamwork. Soldiers who had feared encountering a Tiger in battle now whispered about how it could be defeated, how intelligence and planning could triumph over sheer power. One afternoon, Lidderdale gathered the crew near the tank. "Remember this," he said, pointing to the massive gun and armor. "This machine is powerful, yes. But it's not invincible. Every battle has rules. Every opponent has weaknesses. Today, we've turned fear into knowledge." The captured German crew had become silent observers during this process. Their initial defiance had faded, replaced by resignation and curiosity. Some had started explaining aspects of the tank's operation to interpreters. While communication was limited, Lidderdale found it fascinating. Even enemies could become teachers if approached with respect and careful observation. Thomas spent hours sketching diagrams of the interior controls. He imagined future crews using the knowledge he was collecting to survive encounters with similar tanks. He thought about the men who would never face a Tiger in real combat, but who would benefit from their understanding. Students of armored warfare, young soldiers learning strategy, engineers designing the next generation of tanks. Nights in the desert were quiet but restless. The crews took turns guarding Tiger 131, their eyes flicking to it even in sleep. The desert wind carried whispers of the past, the roar of engines, the sharp crack of gunfire, the shouts of soldiers long gone. In those hours, the tank was more than a machine. It was a monument to human ingenuity and the complex morality of war. Eventually, Tiger 131 was prepared for shipment to Britain. Lidderdale watched as it was carefully loaded, the massive treads lifted onto transport rails. Soldiers lined the route, standing at attention. The desert seemed to hold its breath as the tank moved for the last time through North Africa. It had survived the war to this point, and now it would serve as a teacher and a legend. In Britain, Tiger 131 became the centerpiece of study. Engineers analyzed every system, soldiers trained on its weaknesses, and instructors developed new tactics. It influenced armored warfare doctrine, teaching crews how to confront and neutralize the seemingly invincible. The tank became a symbol, a reminder that knowledge and courage could turn even the most terrifying weapon into a tool for understanding. Even decades later, veterans recounted the story of Tiger 131 with awe. They spoke of the careful planning, the tense moments of battle, the exhilaration of standing beside the massive machine after its capture. The tank had been a test of nerves and skill, a proving ground for bravery, and a symbol of how intellect and courage could overcome fearsome odds. Lidderdale himself would recall, in quiet moments, the desert sunsets of Tunisia, the heat, the smell of dust and oil, and the moment he first laid eyes on Tiger 131. It wasn't just a tank, he would say. It was a lesson, a story, a monument to what men can do when they think, plan, and act together. Fear doesn't have to rule you, it can teach you. Tiger 131 survived the war, its armor scarred but intact. It became more than a machine. It became a story of audacity, intellect, and human courage. From North Africa to Britain, it traveled not as a weapon of destruction but as a teacher, a living testament to the power of strategy, collaboration, and respect for both technology and the people who operate it. Even now, when people look upon Tiger 131 in museums or in books, they are not seeing just a tank, they are witnessing the legacy of those who dared to capture it, study it, and learn from it. They are seeing the story of men who faced a legend and emerged wiser, braver, and forever changed. The desert mornings were deceptively calm. Beneath the golden sun, the sand seemed to shimmer like fire, hiding both danger and opportunity. The British crew worked tirelessly around Tiger 131, cataloguing its every detail. Every rivet, every lever, every inch of the massive tracks was inspected, measured, and documented. Engineers marveled at the precision of the German design. It was clear that every component had been meticulously crafted to withstand the rigors of battle. Thomas climbed into the turret again, brushing off sand from his gloves. "It's like stepping inside a living beast," he muttered, running his fingers over the complex network of controls. The cramped interior contrasted sharply with the tank's massive exterior. Here, inside, the entire machine came alive through the hands of its operators. He could almost hear the shouts of the original German crew, feel the vibration of the engine, the recoil of the massive gun as it fired into the deserts of North Africa. Lidderdale joined him, peering down at the interior. "Notice how everything is within reach, yet precise," he said. "This is why they feared the Tiger. But knowledge turns fear into power. Every weakness we document is a lesson for the future." The captured German crew lingered nearby, quietly observing. Initially defiant, they had grown cautious, their pride restrained by circumstance. Some offered begrudging explanations of the tank systems to interpreters, revealing insights that would have otherwise taken months of study to uncover. Lidderdale treated them with respect, knowing that even enemies could become teachers if approached carefully. Every night, the desert wind whispered across the dunes, carrying the echoes of battles fought and lives lost. Soldiers rotated guard duty, their eyes flicking to the massive tank even in sleep. Tiger 131 became more than metal. It was a sentinel of memory, a living monument to the ingenuity and destruction of war. One evening, Lidderdale gathered the crew around the tank. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sand. "Remember this," he said, gesturing to the Tiger. "It's a machine, yes, but it's also a teacher. Every battle it fought, every move it made, has lessons for us. Courage, strategy, and knowledge will always win where fear alone fails." Thomas nodded, sketching diagrams in the fading light. "It's incredible how something so deadly can teach so much," he whispered. He imagined future crews, safe in classrooms and training grounds, learning how to survive encounters with similar tanks. This knowledge, passed down, would save lives, turn fear into preparedness, and shape the tactics of armored warfare for years to come. Preparations for transporting Tiger 131 to Britain began. Every bolt, every hatch, every delicate system was inspected and secured. Lidderdale walked alongside it, feeling the weight of history under his hands. When the tank was finally loaded onto transport rails, soldiers lined the path, standing at attention. The desert seemed to hold its breath as the massive machine was moved carefully, its legacy traveling thousands of miles to a new home. In Britain, Tiger 131 became more than a captured tank. It became the centerpiece of study. Engineers examined every system in detail, soldiers trained to exploit its weaknesses, and instructors developed strategies based on their observations. Its impact on armored warfare doctrine was profound. Crews learned how to anticipate Tiger tactics, to exploit its limited mobility and fuel capacity, and to face seemingly invincible opponents with confidence. Even decades later, veterans recalled the story of Tiger 131 with reverence. They spoke of the tension, the planning, the exhilaration of standing beside the massive machine after capturing it. The tank had tested nerves, judgment, and courage. It had turned fear into fascination, and terror into triumph. Lidderdale often remembered the desert sunsets of Tunisia, the smell of sand and oil, the roar of engines, and the moment he first saw Tiger 131. It wasn't just a tank, he would say. It was a story, a lesson, a monument to what men can do when they think, plan, and act together. Fear doesn't have to dominate, it can teach. Tiger 131 survived the war, armor-scarred but intact. From North Africa to Britain, it traveled not as a weapon of destruction but as a teacher, a symbol of human courage and intellect. Soldiers and engineers alike learned from it, adapted tactics, and passed on the knowledge to future generations. The tank became a living testament to strategy, bravery, and the audacity of those who dared to capture a legend. Even now, museum visitors who gaze upon Tiger 131 are not just seeing a machine. They are witnessing a story of audacity, intelligence, and human courage. They are seeing men who faced a legend and emerged wiser, braver, and forever changed. Every dent, every scratch, every panel tells a story of battle, of planning, and of the delicate balance between fear and understanding. The Tiger, once feared across the deserts of North Africa, had become immortal, not in its power, but in the lessons it provided. It was a teacher, a trophy, and a symbol of how courage, skill, and knowledge could turn even the most terrifying weapon into a story worth telling. The days following Tiger 131's capture were filled with endless observation and preparation. The British crew had settled into a rhythm. Mornings began with the sun blazing over the dunes, painting long shadows across the sand. Engineers would carefully remove panels, check the hydraulics, and map every gear and lever. Soldiers would shadow them, learning the tank's layout and vulnerabilities. Even a single misstep could damage the machine, and they all understood the value of preserving it intact. Thomas became obsessed with the interior. He spent hours climbing in and out of the turret, crouching in the cramped space, running his hands along the controls, imagining the original German crew reacting to every command. He could almost hear the roar of the engine under the desert sun, the vibration of the tracks as it rolled across dunes, the recoil of the gun shaking the entire hull with each blast. He shivered, partly in awe, partly in fear of what this machine had once done. One evening, Lidderdale joined him, leaning over the massive gun. "Notice how every system is designed to be precise, yet efficient," he said. "They built this machine for both fear and function. But every design has limits. That's what we're learning." The German crew remained nearby, quiet and wary. Initially resentful, their demeanor had softened. Through interpreters, they explained nuances of the tank's operation, how to maintain the tracks, how to balance the fuel load, how the sighting system adjusted for long-range fire. The British crew listened intently, realizing that even enemies could be teachers if approached carefully. The operation replayed itself in Thomas's mind every night. He would see the Tiger moving across the valley, feel the tension of the flanking maneuver, hear the roar of the Shermans, and imagine the German crew scrambling as the hatch was blocked. Every small movement of that battle had been rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times, yet it still brought a surge of adrenaline. Days blurred into nights as the Tiger was prepared for shipment. Every bolt, hatch, and delicate system was secured. Soldiers stood watch in shifts, wary of both sabotage and the desert's unpredictable nature. Lidderdale walked alongside the tank during these nights, feeling the weight of history and responsibility under his boots. Each dent and scratch on the armor told a story, a record of the fights it had endured, the lives it had endangered, the terrain it had conquered. The day Tiger 131 was loaded onto transport rails was quiet but charged with significance. Soldiers lined the path, standing at attention as the tank was carefully lifted. Even the desert seemed to pause, as if acknowledging the passage of a machine that had become legend. Lidderdale's eyes followed every movement. "It's more than a tank now," he murmured. "It's history." In Britain, Tiger 131 became the centerpiece of study. Engineers meticulously examined the armor, dissected the engine, tested the hydraulics, and simulated battle conditions. Soldiers were trained to anticipate Tiger tactics, exploiting its limited mobility, slow turning radius, and fuel consumption. Instructors developed exercises for future tank crews, using the captured Tiger to instill confidence and skill. The impact on morale and strategy was profound. Stories of its capture circulated among the troops. Soldiers no longer feared the Tiger as an unstoppable machine. They knew it could be defeated with strategy and courage. The tale of Tiger 131 became a symbol, a testament to the triumph of human ingenuity and bravery over seemingly insurmountable odds. Even decades later, veterans remembered Tunisia vividly. The heat, the sand, the smell of oil and gunpowder, the roar of engines, and the first sight of the massive Tiger. Lidderdale often reflected on that desert, thinking of the human stories intertwined with the machine. The German crew, skilled and brave. The British crews, tense and determined. The engineers, meticulous and fascinated. "It wasn't just a tank," he would say. "It was a teacher, a lesson, and a monument to what men can accomplish together." Tiger 131 survived the war, its armor battered but intact. From North Africa to Britain, it traveled not as a weapon of destruction, but as a source of knowledge. Soldiers and engineers learned from it, adapted their tactics, and passed on the lessons to new generations. Its story was no longer just about a battle. It was about courage, intellect, and respect for both technology and humanity. Museum visitors today, gazing upon Tiger 131, see more than metal and rivets. They see the legacy of the men who faced a legend and captured it, who transformed fear into understanding and a machine into a lesson. Every dent and scratch tells a story. Every panel reveals a lesson in engineering and strategy. The Tiger, once feared across the deserts of North Africa, had become immortal, not for its firepower, but for the courage, intellect, and daring of those who captured it. The tank became a symbol for future generations, a lesson in bravery, precision, and strategy. It taught that intelligence, teamwork, and courage can turn the most terrifying weapon into a story worth telling. And though the desert sands have long shifted, the legend of Tiger 131 endures, a shadow cast across history, reminding all who hear its story that even the mightiest machine can be understood, respected, and mastered. The memory of the capture never faded for Thomas. Each night, as he lay in his bunk, he replayed the flanking maneuver over and over. The roar of the Sherman's engines, the sand kicked up in clouds, the moment when the Tiger's tracks finally ground to a halt. He remembered the terror in the German crew's eyes, the instant they realized escape was impossible. That single moment had changed the course of their day, their mission, and the lives of everyone present. Lidderdale often joined him during these quiet evenings. He would sit atop the turret, watching the stars shimmer above the desert, and talk quietly. "It wasn't brute force that captured that Tiger," he said. "It was patience, observation, and knowing when to strike. Every battle is a puzzle, and today we solved it." The German crew, still present but confined, began offering small insights. Through a translator, they explained the Tiger's inner workings, how to balance fuel for maximum range, the quirks of the transmission under stress, the optimal angle for the main gun, even the most efficient way to climb dunes without losing traction. For Lidderdale and his engineers, this knowledge was invaluable. Every detail helped them understand why the Tiger had been feared and how to counter it in the future. The crew spent hours in the turret, tracing the path of the controls, imagining themselves firing into enemy lines. Thomas noted the recoil, the weight of the turret rotation, the precision required to aim the massive 88mm gun. "It's terrifying," he muttered once, "and yet, I can see how it could be used perfectly if you knew every inch of it." Engineers tested the tracks and suspension. They discovered how easily the Tiger could be slowed or stopped in rough terrain, how the engine's thirst for fuel limited long-range operations, and how its massive gun, while devastating, required careful setup and maintenance. Each discovery felt like peeling back a layer of legend, revealing a practical reality behind the fearsome reputation. One night, a sudden desert storm blew through, sand whipping against the armored hull of Tiger 131. The British crew huddled inside nearby tents, listening to the wind howl, imagining how the tank would have fared if it was still in combat. Lidderdale's thoughts wandered to the countless battles the Tiger had seen, villages reduced to rubble, enemy tanks destroyed, lives lost. And now, here it stood, silent, immobile, a teacher waiting to be understood. As the storm subsided, Lidderdale and Thomas returned to the tank. The desert was eerily quiet, the stars shining down on the giant machine. They climbed into the turret, tracing the same path the German crew would have taken under fire, imagining the roar of the gun, the vibrations through the hull, the adrenaline of battle. "You know," Thomas said, almost to himself, "it's not just about power. It's about control, timing, and knowing every weakness. That's what makes the Tiger, the Tiger." Lidderdale nodded. "And now we know those weaknesses. Knowledge is power. Fear doesn't win battles, understanding does." Preparations for transporting the Tiger to Britain began in earnest. Soldiers secured every panel, every hatch, every delicate system. The desert seemed to hold its breath as the massive tank was lifted onto rails, carefully moved through dunes, and readied for the journey across continents. For the crew, it was a moment of bittersweet pride. They had conquered the legend, yet the desert, the heat, and the danger would always remain etched in memory. In Britain, Tiger 131 became the centerpiece of armored warfare studies. Crews practiced maneuvers against its model, engineers tested its systems under controlled conditions, and instructors taught future tank operators how to face and defeat it. The practical lessons were clear: exploit its fuel limits, attack from angles that restricted mobility, and never underestimate the psychological power of its reputation. Decades later, veterans still recall Tunisia, the heat, the dust, the smell of oil and gunpowder, and the moment they first saw the Tiger. For them, it had been more than a machine. It had been a challenge, a teacher, and a symbol of human ingenuity and courage. Lidderdale, in his quiet reflections, often said, "It wasn't just a tank. It was a story." Fear became fascination. Terror became triumph. And every lesson we learned from it saved lives. Tiger 131 survived the war, its armor scarred but intact, traveling from North Africa to Britain. It was no longer just a weapon of destruction. It was a story, a teacher, and a symbol. Soldiers and engineers learned from it, adapted tactics, and passed on the lessons. Museum visitors today see more than a tank. They see courage, intelligence, and audacity embodied in steel. The legend endures. Each dent, each scratch, each panel tells a story of combat, strategy, and human daring. Tiger 131, once feared across the deserts of North Africa, lives on as a testament to the extraordinary skill, courage, and intellect of the men who captured it. It is a reminder that even the mightiest machine can be understood, respected, and mastered by those who are brave enough to face it. The day of the capture remained vivid in the minds of the crew. Lidderdale could still feel the tremor through the Sherman's hull as they approached the valley. Sand whipped across the gun mantlet, stinging their faces, but every soldier's focus was razor-sharp. The Tiger 131 loomed ahead, its massive silhouette both terrifying and awe-inspiring. "Steady," Lidderdale whispered over the radio. "Hold formation. Wait for my signal." Thomas gripped the controls, sweat streaming down his face. He could feel his heart pounding in rhythm with the Sherman engines. Every creak of metal, every shift of sand under the treads heightened the tension. Across the valley, the Tiger's tracks kicked up sand, its engine growling, a predator alert to the slightest movement. The flanking maneuver was risky. One misstep could leave them exposed to the Tiger's 88mm gun. Lidderdale watched as the crew executed their plan with precision. Sherman after Sherman slid silently through the dunes, using the terrain for cover. Dust clouds obscured them just enough to remain unseen, while the Tiger remained focused on the perceived threat at its front. "Now!" Lidderdale barked, and the first shots rang out, aimed not to destroy but to distract. The Tiger's attention snapped forward, its turret turning slowly, massive gun tracking the noise. It was exactly the moment they had prepared for. Two Shermans slid around the sides, cutting off escape routes and blocking the rear hatch. The German crew scrambled inside, confusion and fear written on their faces. Thomas felt a surge of adrenaline as he climbed onto the hull, ready to secure the hatches. He glanced at Lidderdale, who nodded sharply. Together, they blocked the Tiger's exits, effectively immobilizing the crew without firing a fatal shot. The valley, once a battlefield of uncertainty and dread, was now a controlled stage for an unprecedented capture. Minutes stretched into eternity as the crew worked swiftly. The Germans attempted to communicate, shouting orders in rapid German, but the British soldiers had anticipated every move. Finally, resistance ceased. Tiger 131, the unstoppable giant of North Africa, was theirs. Exhausted, the crew stood beside the massive tank. Its armor gleamed in the afternoon sun, rivets and plates gleaming like teeth on a predator. Thomas ran his hand along the turret, feeling the weight and the history imbued in every inch. "I can't believe it," he whispered. "A machine like this, and it's ours." Lidderdale clapped him on the shoulder. "It's not just about possession. It's about understanding. Every weakness we uncover, every detail we record, could save lives in the future." The days that followed were a blur of analysis and observation. The crew examined the tracks, the suspension, the 88mm gun, and the cramped interior. They marveled at the precision German engineers had achieved under the constraints of wartime production. Yet, they also discovered its limitations. Fuel consumption far exceeded Allied tanks, its turning radius was cumbersome in confined terrain, and the Tiger was slow to react to rapid maneuvers. Knowledge, they realized, was the true treasure here. Evenings were quiet, reflective. The desert wind whispered across the dunes, carrying memories of battles fought. Lidderdale would sit atop the turret, staring at the horizon, thinking of the lives touched by the Tiger's presence. Thomas sketched diagrams in the sand, imagining future crews learning from these observations. The German crew, meanwhile, grew increasingly cooperative. They explained nuances of the engine, the gun, the suspension. Through translators, they described tactical strategies, how they would have navigated the valley if given more time, how the Tiger's power could be maximized in skilled hands. For Lidderdale and his engineers, these insights were invaluable, turning a terrifying enemy into an unprecedented teacher. Preparations to ship Tiger 131 to Britain began. Soldiers worked carefully, securing every hatch and panel, lifting the massive tank onto transport rails with cranes and rigging. Lidderdale walked alongside, feeling the weight of history under his boots. Every scratch, every dent, every scar told a story of battles survived, of lives endangered, and of the men who had faced and captured the legend. In Britain, Tiger 131 became more than a captured tank. It became a cornerstone of armored warfare knowledge. Crews trained on it, learning to exploit its weaknesses. Engineers studied every mechanism, preparing manuals and training exercises. Tactics were rewritten, strategies refined. The tank's capture had not only lifted morale but had provided an invaluable lesson in intelligence and ingenuity. Even decades later, veterans remembered Tunisia with vivid clarity: the heat, the sand, the oil, the gunpowder, and the roar of engines. Lidderdale would recall the desert sunsets, the tension in the valley, and the instant Tiger 131 had been immobilized. "It wasn't just a machine," he would say. "It was a teacher." Fear became fascination. Terror became triumph. Tiger 131 survived the war intact. It traveled from North Africa to Britain, evolving from a weapon of war into a symbol of courage, intellect, and audacity. Soldiers learned from it, adapted tactics, and passed on knowledge that would save countless lives. Museum visitors today see not just a tank, but a story, a testament to human bravery and skill, and a lesson in how understanding and strategy can conquer even the most terrifying adversary. Even now, the shadow of Tiger 131 endures. Each dent, each panel, each detail tells a story of battle, skill, and courage. It remains a lesson that even the mightiest weapon can be understood, respected, and mastered by those brave enough to confront it, a story of human ingenuity triumphing over fear. Soon after Tiger 131 arrived in the United Kingdom, all personnel involved in its study felt the magnitude of what they were holding in their hands. It was not just a war machine, but a key to understanding how German armored vehicles had threatened Allied tank units. Lidderdale and his team worked day and night, examining every mechanism, every bolt, every detail inside. The tank's hull, once a symbol of terror, had now become a teacher. Engineers inspected the gun, studied the aiming precision, observed the suspension, and assessed how it handled sand and rough terrain. Commanders and instructors developed training exercises for future crews, practicing against the Tiger model on training grounds. Strategies that had once seemed impossible against this machine were now transformed into concrete instructions capable of saving lives. Lidderdale's crew occasionally recalled memories of the desert, of the moment when their column surrounded Tiger 131. They discussed the fear they had felt that day and their amazement at how luck and careful planning turned the impossible into victory. Even the German soldiers who remained in captivity acknowledged the skill of the British. "You acted precisely, without haste. This was your day," said one of them through a translator. With each passing day, their understanding of the machine deepened. The tank that had once inspired fear in thousands of soldiers had now become a symbol of study, discipline, and the power of intellect over brute force. Tiger 131 became the centerpiece of a museum, where new generations could see not just metal, but history, a lesson that knowledge conquers fear, and strategy conquers legend. Lidderdale and his team understood that their achievement was more than just capturing a machine. It was an example of how courage, planning, and teamwork can change the course of a war, even when the enemy seems invincible. They knew that the lessons learned from Tiger 131 would endure long after the battles ended, inspiring future generations. Years passed, and Tiger 131 stood in the museum, surrounded by visitors, curious children, and respectful veterans. Everyone could see in it not a weapon, but a symbol of courage and intellect. Its mark on history was eternal, in strategies, in training exercises, in stories of bravery and ingenuity. For Lidderdale and Thomas, that day ended quietly, without fanfare, but with deep satisfaction. They witnessed how a once-feared legend had transformed into a teacher and an inspiration. And although the sands of North Africa no longer whispered of battles, the story of Tiger 131 continued to live on, as a reminder that even the most intimidating machines and situations can be understood, overcome, and used to educate future generations. Tiger 131 survived the war. Its armor was dented but steadfast. It was not just a tank, but a symbol of human courage, intellect, and teamwork. And that was its true power, not in the 88mm gun or massive tracks, but in the lessons it left to those who faced it head-on and turned fear into knowledge. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as the Allied column advanced through the dunes of Tunisia. Every vehicle rattled over sand and rock, engines straining under the weight of men and equipment. Yet ahead, a massive silhouette loomed against the horizon, dark and imposing, Tiger 131. Its enormous 88mm gun seemed to dominate the landscape, its tracks leaving deep impressions in the sand like the footprints of a giant. The German crew inside were tense but disciplined, unaware that the fate of their tank was about to change forever. Lidderdale scanned the valley through binoculars, noting every detail. "Hold position," he ordered. "Wait for the right moment." His crew, hearts hammering, adjusted their Shermans into position, hugging the cover of the dunes. Thomas could feel the vibration of the engine through his hands as he gripped the controls. Dust whipped across their faces, stinging eyes and mouths, but every soldier's focus was sharp. They knew that one misstep could turn this opportunity into disaster. The plan was simple but risky. A frontal distraction would force the Tiger's attention, while flanking Shermans would cut off escape routes. Timing was everything. Lidderdale's voice, calm yet firm, guided the operation. "Now!" Gunfire erupted, but the shots were calculated, designed not to destroy, but to distract. The Tiger's turret swung slowly, tracking the sound. The German crew's eyes widened, their panic barely contained as the flanking Shermans slid around the dunes and blocked the rear hatch. Thomas felt adrenaline surge as he climbed atop the Sherman, ready to secure the Tiger's hatches. Every muscle tensed. Every heartbeat counted. And then, silence. The massive tank, once unstoppable, was immobilized. The German crew surrendered, shocked but unharmed. For the first time, the legendary Tiger was in Allied hands. Thomas ran a hand along the turret, marveling at the precision of German engineering. "It's incredible," he whispered. "So terrifying, and yet so logical." Over the following days, the British crew worked tirelessly to understand their prize. Every bolt, every hatch, every internal mechanism was examined. Engineers measured armor thickness, tested the suspension, and studied the engine's quirks. They discovered that, despite its power, the Tiger had limits: enormous fuel consumption, a slow turning radius, and vulnerability to coordinated attacks. Knowledge, they realized, was now their greatest weapon. Even the captured German crew became teachers. Through translators, they explained the optimal use of the Tiger, the coordination between driver, gunner, loader, and commander, and the subtleties of its aiming systems. Lidderdale listened intently, appreciating that the tank's true power had always been in the minds of the men operating it. Nights were quiet, with the desert wind whispering across the dunes. The Tiger, silent yet imposing, became a monument to the past, a machine that had struck fear into thousands, now a teacher. Thomas sketched diagrams, imagining future crews learning from this captured legend, and Lidderdale reflected on the lessons of courage, planning, and teamwork that had made the capture possible. Soon, preparations began to transport Tiger 131 to Britain. Soldiers secured hatches, reinforced fragile components, and lifted the tank onto transport rails. Lidderdale walked alongside it, feeling the weight of history under his boots. Every dent, every scar told a story of battle, of lives endangered, of a predator now tamed. In Britain, Tiger 131 became the centerpiece of armored warfare study. Engineers examined every mechanism, soldiers trained against it, and instructors devised exercises to exploit its weaknesses. Strategies once considered impossible were now concrete lessons, capable of saving lives in combat. The Tiger's capture had transformed fear into understanding and legend into education. Years later, veterans still recalled the desert, the heat, the sand, the roar of engines, the smell of oil and gunpowder, and that fateful day when the Shermans had flanked the Tiger. Lidderdale often reflected on the moment, quietly marveling at how courage, intellect, and teamwork had triumphed over raw power. Even the captured Germans, once proud and defiant, acknowledged the precision and calm of their opponents. Tiger 131 endured through the decades. In museums, surrounded by curious children and respectful veterans, it stood as a symbol, not of destruction, but of human courage, intellect, and resilience. Every dent and scratch told a story. Every rivet and panel spoke of ingenuity, strategy, and bravery. The tank had become immortal, not for its 88mm gun or massive tracks, but for the lessons it had imparted to those who faced it and transformed fear into knowledge. For Lidderdale and Thomas, the story had ended quietly, without fanfare, but with profound satisfaction. They had turned a feared legend into a teacher, a symbol of inspiration, and a source of enduring knowledge. Though the sands of North Africa no longer whispered of battles, the legacy of Tiger 131 lived on, a testament to the enduring power of courage, intellect, and the human spirit. Tiger 131 survived the war. Its armor was dented, scarred, yet resolute. It was no longer just a tank. It was a monument to human courage, reasoning, and teamwork. Its true power lay not in its gun or tracks, but in the lessons it left for those who confronted it face to face, who turned fear into understanding, and who proved that knowledge and strategy could prevail over even the most terrifying adversary. The morning air in Tunisia was thick with heat and tension. Sand shimmered under the relentless sun, creating mirages that danced across the dunes. Lidderdale crouched behind a ridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes, scanning the valley below. There it was, the massive silhouette of Tiger 131, its gun turret slowly rotating, glinting in the sunlight. The German crew inside worked with grim efficiency, unaware that their fate hung by a thread. Thomas's hands were slick with sweat as he gripped the Sherman's steering wheel. Every vibration through the hull seemed magnified, every creak a warning. "It's enormous," he muttered. "I've never seen anything like it." "Focus," Lidderdale replied quietly. "Remember the plan. Frontal distraction, flanking maneuver, immobilize without destroying. Precision, not panic." The Shermans advanced. Dust rose in clouds as engines roared, kicking sand into the air. The Tiger's commander peered through his periscope, spotting movement. The 88mm gun swung toward the approaching Shermans, smoke curling from the barrel. Heartbeats raced on both sides. One wrong move would mean death. "Now!" Lidderdale shouted. The first Sherman fired a calculated volley, not to hit, but to force the Tiger's attention forward. The turret rotated, tracking the sound, massive and deliberate. Two Shermans slipped around the sides, moving silently over dunes to block the rear hatch. Thomas felt adrenaline spike, the moment of truth had arrived. Inside Tiger 131, the German crew scrambled. "Hinterhalt!" the commander yelled. "Ambush!" Tracks ground the sand, engine roaring, but movement was restricted. The flanking Shermans were in place. Escape routes cut off. The crew's panic was palpable, their eyes wide behind their helmets. Thomas climbed onto the Sherman hull, shouting to Lidderdale, "They are trapped!" Moments stretched, frozen in tension, until the German commander raised his hands. Surrender. The tank, legendary across the deserts of North Africa, was immobilized. The British crew exhaled, some laughing with disbelief, some shaking from the strain. Over the following days, Tiger 131 was transformed from a weapon into a classroom. Lidderdale led his team through every inch of the tank. Thomas marveled at the cramped interior, the careful arrangement of controls, the precision of the 88mm gun. Engineers measured armor thickness, studied the suspension, and tested the engine's limits. The German crew, now prisoners, explained the nuances of operating the tank under fire. "The engine overheats if pushed too hard in the dunes," one of them explained through a translator. "And the gun takes time to cool. Every shot must count." Thomas nodded, absorbing every detail. "It's brilliant and terrifying." Nights in the desert were quiet but tense. The wind whispered across the dunes, carrying the scent of sand and oil. Soldiers took turns standing watch over the captured tank. Thomas would lie awake, imagining the German crew fighting in the valley, the roar of the engine, the adrenaline, the terror. Each memory sharpened his understanding. Preparation to transport Tiger 131 to Britain was meticulous. Every hatch and panel was secured, cranes lifted the massive tank, and rails bore it across the dunes. Lidderdale walked alongside, hand brushing the scarred armor. Each dent, each scratch, each bullet mark told a story of battles survived, lives endangered, and a predator now conquered. In Britain, Tiger 131 became the heart of armored warfare study. Engineers dissected mechanisms, commanders trained on its vulnerabilities, instructors developed exercises for future crews. Strategies once deemed impossible were now concrete tactics, saving lives in potential battles yet to come. The Tiger, feared legend, had become a teacher. Decades later, veterans remembered Tunisia vividly. The heat, the sand, the roar of engines, the smell of gunpowder, and the moment the Shermans had flanked the Tiger. Lidderdale would quietly reflect on that day, marveling at how courage, planning, and teamwork triumphed over raw power. The captured Germans, too, acknowledged the skill and precision of their captors. Tiger 131 survived through the decades, standing in museums as a symbol of courage, intellect, and human ingenuity. Visitors saw more than metal. They saw lessons, bravery, and strategy immortalized. Each dent and panel told a story, each rivet a record of battle, innovation, and human daring. For Lidderdale and Thomas, the day's events had ended quietly, without fanfare, but with profound satisfaction. They had turned a feared legend into a teacher, a source of inspiration, and a beacon of knowledge. Though the sands of North Africa no longer whispered of combat, the legacy of Tiger 131 endured, a reminder that even the most terrifying machines and situations could be understood, overcome, and used to educate future generations. Tiger 131 endured the war. Its armor bore scars of combat, yet remained steadfast. It was no longer just a tank. It had become a monument to courage, intellect, and teamwork. Its true power lay not in the 88mm gun, nor in its massive tracks, but in the lessons it imparted to those who faced it, transforming fear into understanding and proving that knowledge and strategy could prevail over even the most formidable adversaries. The sand of North Africa burned on their helmets as the column of Allied tanks advanced through the barren dunes. Every movement required effort, engines roared, metal hulls clanged over rocks and sand. On the horizon ahead rose a dark, almost mythical figure, Tiger 131. Its enormous 88mm gun rotated slowly but deliberately, and its massive tracks left deep impressions in the sand, like the footprints of a giant beast. Lidderdale pressed himself against a low ridge, binoculars in hand, watching every move of the German crew. "Hold position," he said quietly. "Wait for the moment." In the hearts of every British tank crewman beat a tense but steady sense of danger. They knew that one mistake could make this day their last. Thomas felt a tremor in his hands, as if the Sherman itself was straining with him. It's enormous," he murmured. "I've never seen anything like it." "Focus," Lidderdale replied. "Remember the plan: frontal distraction, flanking maneuver, immobilize without destruction. Precision, not panic." The Shermans moved forward. Dust rose in towering clouds, the sun blinding, but each crew maintained their composure. The commander of Tiger 131 spotted movement through his periscope and rotated the massive turret. Its 88mm gun let out a muted roar, threateningly scanning the Allied position. The hearts of the British tankers raced, their breathing heavy. "Now!" shouted Lidderdale. The first volley of shots was calculated, not to destroy, but to distract. The turret turned slowly, tracking the noise. Two Shermans quietly slipped around the sides, intercepting the rear exits and cutting off any chance of escape. Thomas felt adrenaline surge as he climbed onto the Sherman's hull, ready to secure the Tiger's hatches. Muscles tensed, every heartbeat loud in his ears. Inside Tiger, the German crew scrambled. "Hinterhalt!" the commander shouted. The tracks scraped the sand, the engine roared, but space was tight. The flanking Shermans had taken their positions, blocking every exit. Panic was evident in the eyes of the German tankers. "They're trapped," shouted Thomas, climbing onto the tank's hull. The moments stretched like eternity until the commander raised his hands. Surrender. The legendary Tiger, a symbol of terror, was immobilized. The British exhaled, some laughing, some trembling from the tension. Thomas ran his hand along the turret, amazed by the precision of German engineering. The following days were devoted to studying and understanding the machine. Lidderdale led his team through every mechanism, every bolt, every hatch. Thomas marveled at the compactness and logic of the interior. Engineers measured the armor, tested the suspension, and examined the engine. The Germans explained the nuances of operating the tank under fire: optimal firing angles, coordination between driver, gunner, loader, and commander. "The engine overheats if pushed too long in the dunes," one said through a translator. "The gun needs time to cool. Every shot must count." Thomas nodded, absorbing every detail. "It's brilliant and terrifying." The nights were quiet, with only the wind whispering through the dunes. Tiger, motionless, became a monument to the past. Thomas sketched diagrams, imagining future crews, while Lidderdale reflected on how courage, planning, and teamwork had changed the outcome of the battle. Preparation for transporting Tiger 131 to Britain was meticulous. Every panel, every hatch was secured, cranes lifted the tank onto rails. Lidderdale walked alongside, hand brushing the armor, feeling the weight of history. Every dent, every scratch told stories of battles, lives saved, and a predator now conquered. In Britain, Tiger became the centerpiece of armored warfare study. Engineers disassembled mechanisms, crews trained, instructors developed exercises. Strategies that had once seemed impossible became concrete lessons capable of saving lives. The Tiger had turned from a legend of terror into a teacher. Years later, veterans remembered Tunisia: the heat, the sand, the roar of engines, the smell of gunpowder, and the moment when the Shermans had surrounded the Tiger. Lidderdale quietly recalled that day, marveling at how courage and strategy had overcome brute force. Even the German tankers acknowledged the precision of the Allied actions. Tiger 131 endured through decades. In the museum, it stood among curious children, respectful veterans, and researchers. It was a symbol of courage, intellect, and ingenuity. Every battle scar told a story, every bolt was a lesson in strategy and bravery. For Lidderdale and Thomas, the day ended quietly, without fanfare, but with deep satisfaction. The legend, once terrifying, had become a teacher and inspiration. The sands of North Africa no longer whispered of battles, but the story of Tiger 131 lived on, a reminder that even the most fearsome machines and situations can be understood, overcome, and used to teach future generations. Tiger 131 survived the war. Its armor was dented but steadfast. It was no longer just a tank, but a symbol of human courage, intellect, and teamwork. Its true power lay not in the gun or tracks, but in the lessons it left for those who faced it head-on and transformed fear into knowledge.